If I had known how that weekend would end, I might have thought twice before saying yes. But the truth is, I didn't hesitate. Darren had leaned over the divider at work on a Thursday and said, "Hey, random question. What are you doing this weekend?" I looked up from my screen, already suspicious. Darren wasn't the kind of guy who made small talk unless he needed something, and we weren't exactly close. Just coworkers, the kind who nodded at each other in the break room and shared occasional eye rolls in meetings. "Not much," I said, cautious. "Why?" he grinned. "Want to go up to my buddy's cabin? Just for the weekend. It's upstate. Chill, off the grid kind of thing. Some beers, maybe a hike." I blinked. "You're inviting me?" "Yeah. You've been looking fried lately. Figured you could use some air." I didn't ask why he cared, or why he was suddenly including me in his plans. Instead, I nodded and said, "Sure." We left after work Friday. Darren picked me up in his old Jeep, music blaring some classic rock song I barely recognized. He tossed my bag in the back like it weighed nothing, handed me a gas station coffee, and said, "It's about a 3-hour drive. You good with that?" "Yeah," I replied, settling in. The ride was quiet at first. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other drumming against his thigh. I glanced over a few times when I thought he wasn't looking. He had this effortless thing about him, scruffy, confident, a little chaotic in a way I found frustratingly attractive. We weren't friends. Not really. But I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about him outside of work. More than once. He talked about work, his ex, a guy he fought with at the gym over a bench. I mostly listened. By the time we got to the cabin, the sun was already dipping behind the trees. The place was old, rustic, and quiet. Just one room, a kitchenette, a wood-burning stove, and a bed shoved against the wall. And no one else. I looked around. I thought it was a group trip. "Yeah," he said, casually. "Couple guys bailed. Just us now." I didn't say anything. He didn't seem bothered. He grabbed the cooler, opened a beer, and flopped onto the one real couch. "Don't worry," he said with a smirk. "I don't snore." We grilled hot dogs over a fire pit, drank until my fingers felt warm despite the chill, and talked about things we'd never mentioned in the office. He told me about his dad leaving, how he didn't talk to his mom anymore. I told him about my last breakup, the first time I said my ex-boyfriend out loud around him. He didn't flinch. Later, inside, we brushed our teeth at the same tiny sink, bumping shoulders in the cramped space. I pointed at the bed. "So how's this working?" He shrugged. "I brought a sleeping bag." He pulled one out from the Jeep and unrolled it on the bed. I said, looking around. "Just one?" "It's big," he said. "You'll fit." I froze. "You want me to share that with you?" He looked over like it was nothing. "You'd rather sleep on the floor? Be my guest. It's like 30 degrees tonight." I hesitated. He wasn't joking. After a second, I exhaled and muttered, "Guess we're sharing." He didn't even blink. The inside of the cabin was already cold, the kind of cold that settles into your bones. Darren zipped the sleeping bag down the middle and spread it open like a blanket across the bed. "You take the wall side," he said, kicking off his boots. "I'm not climbing over you if I have to piss." "Chivalry's not dead," I muttered. He smirked, peeled off his hoodie, and stretched, revealing a glimpse of toned abs above his waistband. I looked away too fast, pretending to be fascinated by the log wall next to me. We both got into the sleeping bag, me in sweatpants and a long sleeve, Darren in just boxers and a tee. The moment he zipped it up, the air seemed to vanish. It was close, tight. My knee brushed his thigh almost instantly, and I pulled away before it could become a thing. "Relax," he said, voice low. "I'm not going to bite." I laughed nervously. Not worried, but I was. Not in a scared way, in a very aware kind of way. We lay there in silence. The only sounds were the wind outside and Darren's steady breathing. The bag trapped our body heat so efficiently I could feel the warmth of his skin through the fabric. After a few minutes, he shifted, adjusting his arm behind his head. "You ever go camping before?" "Not really," I admitted. "This is kind of a first." "Seriously?" What kind of guy hasn't been camping? I shrugged. I grew up in a city. Closest I got was sleeping with the window open. He chuckled. Well, consider this your initiation. There was a pause. You're not freezing, are you? He asked, turning his head toward me. No, it's actually warm in here. Yeah, he said, quieter now. Helps to be close. Another beat of silence. Then, hey, can I ask you something? Yeah? He didn't speak right away. I felt him shift again, this time facing more toward me. My eyes stayed glued to the ceiling. You ever get a read on someone and think maybe they weren't as straight as they said? My breath caught. Was he asking about me? Or himself? I turned my head slightly, finding his eyes in the dark. Yeah, I said. Sometimes. Darren nodded slowly. His gaze dropped to the space between us. I don't know. I've been thinking about that lately. The air suddenly felt heavier, charged with something unspoken. I opened my mouth to ask him what he meant, but before I could, he said, It's weird, right? Being here, with you. How do you mean? He hesitated. You're not like the guys I usually hang out with. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning. Different how? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the zipper, pulling it up an inch, then two, until we were fully sealed in, shoulder to shoulder, with nothing but a thin layer of polyester between us. He didn't speak again that night, but he didn't move away either. I woke up once in the middle of the night, unsure what time it was. The fire in the stove had died down, and the only light came from a sliver of moonlight leaking through the cabin window. I was warm, uncomfortably warm. That's when I realized Darren had moved in his sleep. His arm was across my waist, his chest pressed to my back, and his breath was steady against the back of my neck. I stayed perfectly still. Part of me wanted to shift, to nudge him off gently, but another part, the part one, didn't want to acknowledge, stayed frozen, afraid he'd pull away if I moved. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, the subtle rise and fall of his chest, the soft, slow way his fingers curled against the fabric of my shirt. Was he awake? I couldn't tell. Then, like he'd heard my thoughts, his voice broke the silence, barely above a whisper. You awake? I waited half a second, then answered just as softly. Yeah. Darren didn't move. You warm enough? I almost laughed. Yeah. Pretty warm. Another pause. Then, quieter. You good? That one hit different. It wasn't about temperature. I turned slightly to look at him over my shoulder, and in the low light, I could see his face. Relaxed. Serious, not sleepy. Yeah, I said. I'm good. He nodded once. Cool. But he didn't move his arm. And I didn't ask him to. We stayed like that for a while. My mind was running a mile a minute, but I didn't speak. I didn't want to shatter the weird, charged calm we were lying in. Then he spoke again. You ever wonder if you've been missing something? I turned more this time, my body halfway facing him. Like what? He swallowed. I heard it. I don't know, he said. I've been with a lot of girls. But sometimes, man, it just feels like something's off. Like maybe I've been moving in one direction because I thought I was supposed to? His eyes flicked to mine. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I've never told anyone that, he added. I hesitated, then said, You just did. We were so close I could feel the words on his lips. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. He just looked at me with this strange mix of curiosity and uncertainty that didn't match the guy the first knew from work, the guy who always acted like he had everything figured out. Then his eyes dropped to my mouth and stayed there. I should have said something, should have cracked a joke, defused the moment. But I didn't, because I wanted him to close that space. Instead, he whispered, This doesn't leave this room, right? I nodded, and then, slowly, almost like he wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing, He leaned forward. Our lips met in a soft, tentative press. Not desperate, not performative, just real and careful. When he pulled back, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me. Then he kissed me again, longer this time, more certain. The second kiss was different, less like a test, more like a decision. Darren shifted onto his side, his hands still on my waist. Our legs brushed under the sleeping bag, and I could feel his breath deepen, slow, deliberate, like he was trying to make sense of what he'd just done. I pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. "You sure about this?" His jaw flexed. "No. Honest. Too honest. But I've thought about it," he added. More than I should have. That made something in my chest tighten. I didn't want to push him into anything. I also didn't want to let him pretend this didn't happen. So I stayed still, gave him space, let the silence stretch. But then his hand moved, slowly sliding from my waist up to my chest, resting there like it had every right to. His fingers pressed lightly through my shirt. "You're not what I expected," he murmured. "How do you mean?" He didn't answer right away, just looked at me like he was seeing something new, like a shift had finally clicked into place. Then, "You make me feel calm. Even now." "That's not normal for me." I gave a soft laugh. "You call this calm?" He smirked. "Yeah. I mean, this is the least chaotic I've felt in weeks." He leaned in again, and this time his lips found mine without hesitation. His hand slid to the back of my neck, and he kissed me like we weren't in a cabin in the woods, like no one else in the world mattered except the two of us. It wasn't perfect. He moved like someone still figuring it out, his rhythm unsure, the tension in his shoulders betraying how new this was to him. But there was something raw in it, honest, and it didn't feel one-sided. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I could feel his pulse, quick and uneven. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said quietly. "I didn't either," I admitted. "But I'm not mad about it." He chuckled. "Nervous, but real. You're gonna think I'm full of shit." "Why?" "Because I've said I was straight forever. And now I'm in your arms, in one sleeping bag, in the woods, and I just kissed you twice." I shrugged, letting my fingers brush his arm. Sexuality isn't just one thing or the other. Attraction happens, and it doesn't always make sense. He stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I don't know what this means yet," he said, "but I know I don't want to ignore it." I felt something shift in my chest. Hope, maybe, or relief. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees. Inside the sleeping bag, it was warm. Still, quiet. He didn't let go. We didn't fall asleep right away. After the kissing, after the awkward honesty, there was a kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. Darren lay beside me, his arm across my chest now, and for a while we just listened. To the stove creaking as it cooled down, to the wind brushing against the cabin walls, to each other breathing. At one point he asked, "You cold?" "No." He tightened his grip on me anyway. I felt his fingers twitch slightly against my shirt, like he wanted to do more but didn't know how far to go, or if he even should. Eventually I said, "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for." He nodded against my shoulder. "I know." And then, "But I don't want to pretend like this didn't happen either." That part stuck with me. Because most of the time, when something unexpected like this happens with a straight guy, it becomes a secret. A one-time thing. A blur of confusion and regret. But Darren, he wasn't pulling away. He wasn't laughing it off. He just seemed like a guy caught in the middle of something he didn't see coming, and wasn't sure he wanted to stop. We must have fallen asleep around 2 a.m. When I woke up again, the sun was creeping through the wooden slats in the blinds, casting lines of soft orange light across the room. My back was warm. Darren was still pressed against me, one leg draped lazily over mine, breathing slow and even. It took me a second to remember everything. The kiss, his hand on my chest, the words we'd exchanged in the dark. But once I did, I didn't move. Not because I was scared to break the spell, but because it felt right, like waking up in the middle of someone else's dream and realizing you didn't want to leave. Eventually, Darren stirred, groaned into the pillow. His voice was rough with sleep. "Shit," he said. "Did I do that thing where I roll on top of people in my sleep?" I snorted. "No, but you did cuddle me like a human body pillow." He stretched and pulled back a little, blinking blearily. "Sorry, you're not." "No, I'm not." We both laughed. It broke the tension in the best way, like the night had happened, but now the morning could begin without any need to over-explain. He sat up, rubbed his face, and looked at me. "You want coffee, or should we talk about it first?" "Can't we do both?" He grinned. "Yeah, coffee and feelings. Sounds hot." We sat on the porch 20 minutes later, 2 mugs steaming between us, wrapped in blankets and too many layers. Darren kept his eyes on the lake while I waited for him to speak. "You ever think about how fast things can change?" he asked finally. "Every day," he sipped from his mug. "I didn't plan for this." "I know. I'm still figuring it out." "I know that too. But I don't regret it." That made me look at him. "Me either." He exhaled, long and slow. Then, glancing sideways at me, he added, "Just so you know, I'm not expecting anything from you. I don't know where this goes. I'm still new to all of it." I nodded. "I'm not expecting anything either. We'll take it slow." He looked relieved, then amused. "What, no pressure to U-Haul it back to the city together?" "God, no," I said, grinning. "You'd make a terrible roommate." He nudged my shoulder. "You snore." "You hog the sleeping bag." We laughed again, and it felt real. Easy. He reached over and grabbed my hand, not in a dramatic movie way, just casually. Fingers brushing fingers. It wasn't a label, it wasn't a confession, it was just a beginning. The rest of Saturday passed in this weird, peaceful rhythm, like nothing and everything had changed at once. We hiked, ate leftover hot dogs and trail mix, sat on a log by the lake tossing rocks into the water, talking about nothing important. Darren was himself, not distant, not weird, just a little more thoughtful, a little more watchful. At one point, he asked if I'd ever dated someone who wasn't sure about their own sexuality. I told him yes, and that it was complicated. "Did it work?" he asked. "No," I said, "because they didn't want to admit it, not even to themselves." He went quiet after that. I let him be. Later, back at the cabin, we cooked pasta on the tiny propane stove and played cards by lantern light. He accused me of cheating. I accused him of being too competitive. At one point, we were both laughing so hard he nearly spit out his drink. It felt normal. Better than normal. When it was time for bed, he didn't ask where I was sleeping. Just got into the bag and left the zipper open until I joined him. This time, there was no awkward shuffle. No questions. No hesitation. His arm was around me within seconds. In the middle of the night, I woke up to find him watching me. Not in a creepy way. Just quietly, like his thoughts wouldn't let him sleep. "You good?" I whispered. "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking." "About?" He didn't answer at first. Then, "You ever feel like you're one person in public and someone else in private?" "All the time." He exhaled like that gave him permission to keep going. "I've always been that guy," he said. "The one who goes out with girls, talks big, makes jokes. But lately I've been feeling off, like something's missing." I didn't speak, just let him talk. "This trip? I didn't invite you on accident," he added. "I mean, I told myself I did. Just wanted a break, someone to hang with. But I think a part of me knew I wanted to see what this would feel like." His hand slid across my chest again, fingertips light, like he was afraid to be too sure of anything. I turned to face him. "You don't have to define it," I said. "You don't have to explain it. Just be honest. That's enough." Darren nodded, eyes on mine. Then he kissed me again. And this time, it wasn't hesitant or cautious. It was open, real, conflicted, but sure. Like something inside him had finally stopped resisting. We didn't go further than kissing that night. It wasn't about that. Not yet. But we didn't stop touching. Either. His hand stayed on my chest as we fell asleep, and mine rested on his arm, grounding us both. No labels. No expectations. Just warmth. And maybe the start of something neither of us had seen coming. Sunday morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee. At first, I thought I was dreaming, until I rolled over and saw Darren, barefoot and shirtless, poking at a pan on the stove. His hair was a mess, and he looked like someone who didn't know he was being watched. "You cook now?" I said, voice rough from sleep. He glanced back, smirking. "I make 3 things: eggs, bacon, and bacon again. So consider yourself spoiled." I sat up slowly, the sleeping bag sliding off me. "That smells amazing." "You smell like campfire and man sweat," he said, tossing a paper towel at me. I caught it and grinned. "Still let me share your sleeping bag, though." He didn't say anything right away, but his smirk softened. "Yeah, I did." The moment held longer than I expected. Quiet, simple. After breakfast, we packed up slowly, neither of us in a rush to leave. We kept brushing past each other in the cabin, letting touches linger a second too long. At one point, he leaned against the doorframe while I was tying up my bag and said, "Hey." I looked up. He rubbed the back of his neck. "This doesn't have to be a one-time thing, right?" I blinked. "No, not unless you want it to be." He stepped forward, crouched in front of me so we were eye level. "I don't know what this means yet, but I'm not pretending it didn't happen." I nodded. "Okay. And if we hang out after this," he added, "it doesn't have to be like some big secret." That part caught me off guard. "You're not worried what people might think?" "I've spent most of my life worried about that," he said, "and I'm still miserable half the time. So maybe it's time I stop." I didn't respond right away. Just stared at him, trying to find the right words. Then I leaned forward and kissed him. Quick, soft, but firm. "I'd like to see where this goes," I said. He smiled. Yeah. The drive back was different, still quiet, but in a comfortable way. We didn't need to fill the air with small talk. Darren reached over at one point and rested his hand on my leg. I didn't even think twice before laying my hand over his. When we pulled into the city a few hours later, he parked in front of my place. I turned to him. "So, see you at work tomorrow?" He raised an eyebrow. "We're just going to go back to being coworkers now?" "We could start there," I teased. He leaned in, kissed me once, then said, "Or you could come over tonight. I make terrible spaghetti." "You're really pushing the culinary limits." "I know what I am." We both laughed. And just like that, the weekend was over. But something else was just beginning. Monday felt surreal. Walking into the office with Darren felt like nothing had changed. Same fluorescent lights. Same lukewarm coffee. Same awkward good mornings from the receptionist, who always forgot my name. But something had changed. And I felt it every time Darren glanced at me from across the room with that subtle smile he hadn't used before, the one that meant something now. We kept it cool, professional. But during lunch, he messaged me on Slack, still thinking about that night in the bag. I stared at the message for a solid minute before replying, "Same. You free after work? Only if you promise to bring better snacks than trail mix." That night, I went to his apartment. And the night after that, he came to mine. It didn't turn into some whirlwind romance. It wasn't easy. He had moments where he pulled back, out of habit, out of fear, I'm not sure, but he always came back around. There were questions he didn't have answers to, conversations we weren't ready to have yet. But there was also this quiet, surprising intimacy building between us, one that didn't need to be rushed. He asked questions. He listened. He opened up in ways I never expected from the guy who once said 5 words a day at work. One Friday night, a few weeks later, we were on his couch, half watching a movie, his feet in my lap. Out of nowhere, he said, "So I told my brother." I paused the movie. "Told him what?" "About us, about me." He looked nervous. He was cool about it, said he kind of figured. I stared at him for a second. "You're okay?" "Yeah," he said, then gave a short laugh. "Honestly, I feel lighter. I smiled. You should. He nudged my knee with his foot. You make this easier, you know. I didn't know what to say to that. So I kissed him instead. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because something that started in a sleeping bag, in a cold cabin in the woods, had slowly turned into something warmer, steadier, and more honest than either of us expected. And maybe that's what made it stick, not the surprise of it, but the way it kept growing, even when we were scared.